Hello and welcome to September's Meet the Expert. This is our monthly opportunity to bring you some free training, some free information to our network on different topics. And we try and make the topics as big a range as possible. And I must admit, I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm Angela Cripps, the MD of the Recruiting Gym, and my guest today is Catherine Stratta. We will get to see her in large form at the end of the presentation, but I'm going to dive straight in on this one because it is about your journey. It is all about you. So we're going to learn as we go along. So let me pass over straight away to Catherine Stratta.
Okay, thank you very much, Angela, and thank you so much for inviting me. So today is basically all about bipolar disorder. And I have had this since I was 12, so I'm quite familiar with things, and I'm going to just give you, to start with, a quick definition. There's this book, which is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It was originally published in 1952 and then revised. The last big revision was in 2013, and when we've got DSM-5. And then in March this year, DSM-5-TR was published. TR just means text revision. There are one or two revisions for bipolar disorder, but it's very much in the small print. And what it does is it describes disorders and symptoms as dimensions, so that people fall along a continuum of bipolarity. In the UK, this is very important, bipolar disorder is only diagnosed by a psychiatrist. A GP can't diagnose it, and that is one of the big issues that I have with the fact that people often don't get past their GPs with bipolar disorder because they normally only go along when they're depressed. And so the GP sees a depressed person and gives them antidepressants. And they go away and they may get better or they may not, or they may have a high. But then, of course, when they're high, who would go to see their GP? So the next time they come back again, they have antidepressants for being depressed. So it gets into a bit of a cycle, but more on that later. So there are three main types. The first one is bipolar 1 disorder. Stephen Fry is a famous person who has bipolar 1. And the only criterion for the diagnosis of this is one lifetime episode of mania. And mania is actually a psychotic state. When people are in mania, they actually lose touch with reality, and they can be doing dangerous things. They can be threatening lives of other people or threatening their own lives. And very often people with this disorder end up in hospital when they have mania. Normally, the people have at least one lifetime episode of major depressive disorder, though that's not actually required for the diagnosis. I think there are very few people that only have the mania. Most people have the depressive side as well. So that's bipolar 1. The next one is bipolar 2. And this is a little more gentle on the mania side, but they tend to have more episodes of the depressive disorder. So people with bipolar 2 have at least one episode of hypomanic disorder, which is a heightened state of awareness. Everything's very exciting. They don't sleep. They may spend a lot on credit cards. They may be going out, having a wonderful time. Often they are sexually promiscuous, but they know what they're doing when this happens. So it's not like the mania for bipolar 1. And again, as I say, they have more episodes of the major depressive disorder. And you'll see from these diagnoses that that's the reason that bipolar disorder has to be diagnosed in retrospect. So you have to have had this for then the diagnosis to be made. And that's one of the reasons why it takes an average in this country, in the UK, of 8.5 years for people to get a diagnosis. That's 8.5 years from the onset of symptoms. And that's something that I particularly would very much like to see changed. So the third type is unspecified. And here you can get a rapid flicking between the manic and depressive symptoms, which meet the severity criteria for either mania or depression, plus the two specifiers, which is mixed features, which are symptoms from the opposite polarity, and anxiety or distress features with depression or mania. So the incidence. Bipolar disorder is actually the most heritable of the psychiatric conditions, and it affects 1 in 50 people worldwide. So there are a lot of people who are affected by this disorder. Interestingly, there is a 48% incidence among identical twins. If the disorder was purely genetic, it would be 100%. So this shows us that basically there is a genetic component, but this is not the whole story. And in fact, from research, they think that there are multiple genes that have an effect on people. And there are also underlying biological vulnerabilities that play their part as well. And also disturbances in the intracellular signaling cascades, that's within the brain, between the neurons, and also environmental stressors, which can actually bring out the disorder. So it can be dormant for a while and then something happens and you can have an episode, or maybe your first episode. And there's also some new research wondering about immune dysregulation. And there's obviously going to be more information on that, but that's again quite an interesting one. And so this means that very often there is a first degree relative in someone's family if they have this condition, or someone can have what's called psychothermic disorder. This is interesting in what my father had, where people get rages and they get depressed, and they're always a little bit either side of the norm, but they're not bad enough to be hospitalized or to need medication or anything. They're just very difficult to live with. And then that can, as I say, result in someone, a son or daughter or whatever, getting the full-blown bipolar disorder. So what are the characteristics? Well, the biggest frustration among everyone with bipolar disorder is sleep. And that's a problem for mania and hypermania, when you just don't sleep and then your body gets so exhausted that you crash afterwards. And then in depression, sometimes you don't sleep. With my depression, I never slept. I didn't sleep for months and months, and it was so frustrating, and it really messes up your body clock. It gets you very tired, and all of the other symptoms kick in worse because you've got this sleep deprivation and your body cannot do the things it needs to do, all the housekeeping that is so important in sleep. So what keeps people up at night? There's a lot of anxiety, fear. There's fear that they might be going to go into another episode, and of course they might be able to work, they might lose their jobs, there's relationships, they might lose their kids. There's huge amounts of issues for people with this disorder where it's uncontrolled. And there's the pain of depression. The type of depression that people with bipolar disorder have is very, very dark. And it is a situation where you are in pain constantly. Every second of every minute of every hour is just painful. And a very large number of people actually end up committing suicide whilst in that state if they don't receive help. Really not because they want to die, but they just want the pain to stop and they cannot bear it anymore. People get stuck in their head, overwhelmed. These suicidal thoughts, as I've said, keep going round and round. And also the mania and hypermania, when you are in this heightened state and you do things which you might regret, and it's very easy to wreck a life, even with one episode of these. And people are on this what you call emotional roller coaster. So they have the highs and they have the lows, and then they might get a little bit of kind of normal mood in between, or they might go from high to low. And understandably, when your world in your head is going from one side to the other, it's actually very difficult to deal with the outside world. For instance, in relationships, it's very difficult to be close to someone like this. Someone says to you, oh, you've got to pull yourself together, but actually you can't, because you are in these states and you don't have any control over them. I remember my mother used to say to me, can't you save some of this, elation for when you're next depressed? And I was like, well, no, I can't. It's either one thing or the other. People withdraw also when they're depressed. They don't want to do anything. They just want to be in bed all the time. They don't want to go outside. Often there's a lot of anxiety around going outside and other people seeing them because they know they're not right. And there is, of course, a lot of stigma, and people feel very much ashamed and guilty that they can't be as other people are. And that has got better. The stigma has got better, but it's still there for people. So what are the hopes and dreams? Peace. That's a huge one. Peace, stability, self-worth, and just to love and be loved, which is a human thing for everyone, I guess. So my story then. My mood swings started when I was at 12. And as a late teenager, I was hospitalised because I told my parents that I wanted to kill myself, and they didn't know what to do. So I was just put in hospital. I was in hospital with a lot of very much older people. It was a very scary experience. And as a result, I think it took me longer to get well again. However, I did. I came out and I managed to get to medical school. I was at Sheffield studying to be a doctor. While I was there, I had a severe depression and I had to be hospitalised. And then I had to pass a test to get back into medical school, a psychological test, which I passed when I recovered. And then about a year later, I had another episode. And it was at this point that I realised that I wasn't getting anywhere, and I had to kind of give up my dream because I'd always wanted to be a doctor. I'd always wanted to heal people. But I had to I came to the conclusion that wasn't to be. And that was very traumatic for me, and very, very sad. But I did recover from that episode. And it wasn't until I was 25 that I went to see the consultant psychiatrist. And that was quite amazing because I'd always seen the registrars before. I'd never seen him before. In fact, I wasn't even sure he existed. But he said, sit down, and he just smiled at me and he said, I haven't read all of your notes, but I see from what I have read that you've had a really hard time. And I just kind of looked up at him and I thought, wow, this is interesting. No one's ever said that to me before. And it was like I was kind of being vindicated. I felt that someone had an idea about what had happened to me and, you know, how I was. And he said, I think it's time for you to try lithium. And I just sort of surprised myself because I've not really wanted to go on lithium because there's a lot of bad press around it. But I looked at him and I thought, you know, he looks as if he knows what he's doing. I'll give it a go. So I went on lithium, and within 6 weeks of starting the drug, because it has to be titrated up so that your body gets used to it, I felt incredible. It was like I was kind of thinking, wow, this must be how everyone else feels, because I felt stable, I felt held, and I felt that I wasn't looking over my shoulder to think what's going to happen to my mood, how am I going to be tomorrow, what's going to happen. And this to me was really a revelation. And lithium served me very well. It meant that I could start working. I had a career in the pharmaceutical industry, 25 years in clinical project management, involved in trials all around the world with large numbers of patients. And I really loved that. I have a very research orientated brain, and I absolutely loved that time. And during that time, my husband was in the army, in the parachute regiment. He was leaving, and we'd had our honeymoon in Africa. And one day he said to me, oh, I'd really love to drive through Africa in a Land Rover. And I was like, wow, that sounds quite a good idea. So we planned. And in 2002, we actually did it because he was working in Africa. It was his last job in the army, and he was working near Pretoria. So he had time to actually, while he was there, source a Land Rover and start kitting it out. And then I came, I gave my notice in for my job, and I went out to join him. However, we had a bit of a mishap at the beginning, and here, this is a map of where we actually went. The green is where we were originally planning to go, And the yellow is actually where we ended up going. Only before we could, just before the border between South Africa and Namibia, we had a bad road traffic accident. I was actually driving, and it was on a two-way road, and I was just coming around a corner. He was reading the map sitting next to me, and there was a large truck, and it was being overtaken by one of these backies, and that was the road. So I had to get out of the way to avoid a frontal crash. So I swerved to the left, and what happened was the Land Rover, because it was a little bit unbalanced, because we had quite a high centre of gravity, it actually switched over, and we went over onto the side and then onto the roof and the side again. And this was how the Land Rover ended up. And I was at the bottom, and I was kind of squashed into the side. Anyway, my husband got out and tried to pull me out, and I couldn't push from my right hand side, so he had to pull me out to get me out of the inside. And we got me out, and he sat me, took out the seat of the Land Rover, sat me down by the rock in a bit of a shady position. And we noticed that my right hand shoulder was all kind of droopy, and I couldn't move anything. At that time I didn't feel any pain. I think I was still in shock. Anyway, the pain started. The driver of the truck had stopped. The other one had gone on. He helped to call the police. We were taken to hospital, and I had broken the distal end of my clavicle, which meant that I would need an operation to actually get my shoulder in working condition. And we were taken down back to Cape Town, and I was really lucky. I was seen by the expert who did the shoulders for the rugby team, the Springboks of South Africa, and I had one operation. Instead of pins and plates, which I would have had I been in the UK, I had dissolvable tape, and he fixed my shoulder back together again. And that was quite remarkable, because when I saw the x-rays, there was about 64% of the bones that were just not there, and the ligaments had all been torn away in the crash as well. And this, I'm telling you all this because this is quite interesting. That afternoon, when I'd had some painkillers and we'd been in the hospital before we went down to Cape Town, I was on the phone arranging with our insurance what we were going to do. I hadn't really thought about, what had happened to me or whatever. We just carried on. And in fact, we got to hospital, and I was put on a gantry at the end of a ward that evening. And my husband went to stay somewhere else in Cape Town. And I remember in the morning, my painkillers worn off, and I got myself down to the toilets. So I thought I'd have a wash. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and I just saw blood, because my husband had a nosebleed, and I still have blood in my hair. And I just felt like crying. And I remember I looked at myself and I thought, I can't let this go, because I have to be strong, because I know my husband doesn't like hospitals and things, and I'm the one who needs to be strong and just, we can do this. So I kind of resolved not to let any emotion out, which was probably a bad thing, but at the time I thought I was doing the best. And then when my husband came in to see me in the morning, I was like, oh, we will be going, we can do this, we can get ourselves sorted. I just need an operation, and we're going to be okay. So in fact, that's what we did. Within 6 weeks after my operation, it was about a week after me getting back to Cape Town, because the swelling had to subside before they did the operation, we had sourced another Land Rover, and we were on our way again. So that's just to show the kind of resilience that people, can have. So the rest of my story, interestingly, as I said, that trauma is a cumulative thing. So the fact that I could just ride through, and we went through the rest of our journey, was fine. But after that, then in 2004, which was only 2 years later, I had another accident on the M25. In fact, it was late. I think it was about 5:45 on a Friday, and I was coming back from Lyon, I'd been to see one of our investigators, one of the doctors doing one of our studies, and I was driving back from Heathrow when a Polish lorry driver fell asleep and knocked my car into the next lane. And I thought I was going to cause this huge thing, and I had this vision in my head of being at the bottom of a huge pile of cars. And anyway, he stopped, I stopped. He said, "I'm sorry, I fell asleep. I don't know why. I had a full night last night. I'm really sorry." So that was actually quite helpful, because he had admitted liability. And then exchanged details and everything. And I somehow got home. I don't remember how I got home. But then the next day, I just kind of came to a full stop. And that was when the PTSD struck in. And that was from the cumulative effect of both of those accidents, which is an interesting thing. And also reminds me to tell you that one of the problems with having bipolar disorder is it very often does stem from some childhood trauma. So trauma is quite a complicated thing with the emotions and things that we'll probably speak about a little bit more. So anyway, I recovered. It took me about 2 years. We went to live in America in 2006 for a year with my husband's job, came back in 2007. And then I carried on, only I was actually I became self-employed, and I became a consultant to the pharmaceutical industry. So I carried on that career. However, in the January of 2018, my doctor had not done a kidney function test for about 6 months. She called me in to have my blood done, and we found that my kidney function had gone down significantly. So she stopped the lithium. Unfortunately, she didn't give me another mood stabiliser. She gave me some sertraline, which is an SSRI antidepressant, which didn't work. And after 2 months following the stopping the lithium, I had lost, I'd gone down from 70 kilos to 53. And I was very severely depressed. I couldn't see a psychiatrist because there was a waiting list. So she phoned someone up and they suggested Lamotrigine, which is actually an anti-epileptic drug. But I had a huge number of side effects from that. I couldn't feel the ends of my fingers. My nails were peeling. I was chewing the inside of my mouth, and I was dropping things. And I just went back to her. I said, "I'm sorry, I cannot deal with this drug." So anyway, we went back after that, and I did get to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist took me off the Lamotrigine and put me on to typing, which is actually antipsychotic. I didn't really want to take it, but they wouldn't let me continue with lithium, and obviously I needed to take something, and this was one of the perhaps more attractive antipsychotics, if you can call an antipsychotic more attractive, because the half-life's only 6 hours, so I could take my dose at night time, and then I wouldn't be dopey in the morning. Anyway, so this was still 2018. This was June, and then at that time I took my mum to the hospital because she was referred by my GP because she wasn't well, and we got a diagnosis of stage 4 bowel cancer, just out of the blue. And she lived for 6 months. She died at home with all of us there. She never had to go into hospital or anything, but it was a huge loss. So that was the first of, she died just after her 89th birthday, actually. She died on the 1st of December 2018. And then within a couple of months of that, in February 2019, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. After that, I had 3 operations within the next 6 months. I had to have a mastectomy, I had to have reconstruction, and I'm still in this depressive episode. It was being treated, obviously, with the quetiapine, but I was still pretty badly depressed, and I was still very low weight-wise. So because of all these things, I had the grief of my mum, which I had kind of put on hold because of the fact that I was depressed and I had this cancer diagnosis. I was very lucky. I actually got a whole year of working with this psychologist who was amazing. She was actually a fully qualified doctor who had gone into psychology because she was very interested in different ways of working with people. And we basically worked together on routines and different modalities that would help me through these three big life changes that were happening. So we looked at EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is the acupressure tapping, mindfulness, sleep hygiene, circadian rhythms, diet, gratitude, energy medicine. We just looked at loads of things, and eventually I managed to recover and I transformed my life. And now I want to basically help others do the same thing, having done all this experimentation on myself. So because of my 48 years experience of living with this condition, I would like to teach people tools to help them accept, and acceptance is a big thing. It was a long time before I accepted that this is how I am. I have bipolar disorder, and to move beyond the diagnosis and to manage and release the suppressed emotions, move out of overwhelm and reconnect, basically firstly with themselves and then with their family and friends who are so vital to us with this disorder. So what do? I support people in making lifestyle and behavioural changes. Those help them to move forwards. I help them to gain the most stability and balance and regain that hope and joy, so that we can turn all the challenges that we have into opportunities for them to use their gifts to help others to transform their lives. So my approach is holistic. I look at the person. Now, bipolar disorder doesn't define you. It is just something that you have. So what I try to do is try to get people through that thing of I am bipolar. I don't encourage them to say that. It's I have bipolar disorder, because I am a separate person and this is just something that I happen to have, and it's something that I can move through. And what I do is I actually augment and complement the medical and pharmaceutical approach. I'm not trained as a doctor, although I spent some years at medical school, which has helped me. But I actually look at that person. So, as I've said, we look at acceptance, sleep, which is such a big issue for people. I do a lot on sleep hygiene with people. I'll show you a bit about more about that in the next slide. We look at exercise and diet, emotions, how we manage our emotions, what we do with them, how to actually allow ourselves to experience those emotions in a controlled way, because it takes the body 12 seconds to process an emotion. So you can bring something up, and however unpleasant it is, if you allow it to go through, that will only take about 12 seconds. And then that emotion has been processed by your body and isn't stuck there anymore. And the problems begin when we get emotions that are stuck, that we've suppressed and kept with us. And that's a human thing, is to do that. It's a very common thing to do, often with our conditioning when we're children. I also do energy work with people. We look at stress management, because one of the issues for people with bipolar is that any form of stress can very easily push people into an episode either way. So we look at how to manage that, how to turn your reaction, because you always have a reaction to stress, but after that you can then choose how you behave. So we look at turning that round and actually making that understood, so we understand why we're having that reaction, and then we can change how we feel towards something. And I also look at vagal tone. When I was at medical school, the vagus nerve 10, was just a wanderer, which is what vagus means in Latin. But since then, there has been a huge amount of research to show that the vagus nerve is actually really, really much more important than we ever thought. It goes through the whole of the body, and in order to get the body into a rest and recuperate mode rather than a fight or flight mode, which is the sympathetic system, the vagal nerve can get you back into the parasympathetic, which is the rest and recuperate, as I said. So it's quite important that you learn how to activate that, particularly with bipolar disorder. because there are quite a lot of hacks that you can use which will actually change how you're feeling. Also, breath work. Most people breathe really badly, really in a shallow way, and they're not grounded. They're kind of living in their head all the time. So I help people reconnect with their breath and actually use that to help in sleep and other things, and also to help with any anxiety, because there is a lot of anxiety that people with bipolar disorder have. And grounding to get you back in your body and connecting with the earth. And on that tone also reconnecting with their self and reconnecting with nature. This is such a big thing. Lately I went what's called forest bathing, which is when you go into a wood and you have a guide and you basically look at all your senses, you move slowly, you let the phytogens, which the plants are producing, you let them help you, and you come out, and you, for about 2 weeks you feel really chilled. It's so good for you. It originated in the Japanese and it doesn't actually translate properly. It's much more spiritual meaning than forest bathing in Japanese, but there isn't an English word that you can use to get that across. Also, mindfulness. I think these days we're always so busy, teaching people just to stop and be. We are human beings. We're not human doings. We need to be. We look at animals. We look at the way animals deal with stress. I have 2 border collies. When I touch them, and I know that if I'm upset or something, they just shake. They shake that emotion off, so that then they're back again. And we need to find ways to just let those emotions come through. As I've said before, we can do that, or in a way with movement and exercise and things. I also encourage people to do mood tracking. I have a mood tracker that also tracks gratitude, events, medications, and sleep, which is very helpful in letting people know what the things are that might start a prodromal phase, which is the beginning of an episode either way. And also routines, which are really important for people with bipolar disorder, particularly morning and evening routines when we're getting ready to sleep and then when we're starting a day. So just a few things on sleep. I could talk about sleep forever, really. But the most important thing is actually wake at the same time every day and not have lie-ins, because this resets the circadian rhythms, which are thought in bipolar disorder to be not quite right. So we are vulnerable in that way. But if we wake at the same time every day, then we will start going to bed at the same time, because we'll know when we're tired. So, and then again, I've said the bedtime routine, avoiding blue light before bed from all those devices. You can get blue blocker glasses. They're reasonably priced. You can easily get those on Amazon. Also relaxing evening activities, and avoid alcohol in the evening, because alcohol is a depressant. And it will not help you sleep. It might help you get to sleep, but you will wake up later. And also avoiding daytime naps, so that you make sure that your system is set to sleep at nighttime. And if you can't sleep, rather than lying there, you need to get up, go and do something, and go back when you're tired. A cool, dark bedroom helps enormously, because your temperature goes down in the night. And if you have a hot night, you can remember, even if you don't suffer from anything, it's hard to sleep if you're too hot. It's the same with bipolar. If you're cool, your bedroom is dark. Blackout curtains are very helpful. Earplugs also, or white noise machine. And muscle relaxation and breathing techniques to just calm yourself down. And again, get yourself back into your body rather than being concerned with things in your head. Journaling before bedtime helps. And also just making lists of things that you might be worrying about, so that you can kind of empty your head, put it on a bit of paper, and then you don't need to think about it going forward. Also, the emotional freedom technique is very helpful for sleeping. Exercise and diet. It's been shown now that exercise is at least as effective as antidepressants, and there are no side effects. So I think possibly GPs are now prescribing exercise. I got a 3-month gym membership from my GP recently, actually, And I've not had anything from them, any kind of social prescribing all my life. And I got that in March this year. So I think there are changes coming along. Yoga and Pilates are actually very good. Gym, walking, cycling, run, whatever you enjoy really for exercise, but it is important to be able to get your body moving. Sugar is a nightmare, and processed foods as well. They really do not help your system. They take the bacteria out of your gut, and your gut is actually very, very important. Again, we're talking about the microbes and things in your gut, and you need to increase the amount of fruit and vegetables, organic food if you can get, or organic food if you can afford that. Again, hydrate is very important. Most people do not drink anything like enough water. And alkalinity. Alkalinity is very important. When we're born, we're alkaline, and then when we die, we're acid. And a lot of these processed foods and a lot of red meats just make us more alkaline, and more acidic. And then acidity makes us age. So what do I do for people? So I basically offer everyone who has a diagnosis of bipolar a free 45-minute bipolar discovery call. So what we do in this is we basically talk through where they are. I always meet everyone where they are. It's important. And we see how, where they are, whether they've accepted, whether they're willing to accept the diagnosis, and whether they want to move onwards, and how prepared they are, how actual, what their kind of motivation, because motivation is very important for people wanting to move on, because these things have to be worked at. It's something that takes time. I also offer a 45-minute free call with a relative or friend to help educate them, because so many people don't really understand this condition. People think they know what it's about, but they don't. And it can be so helpful for someone who suffers from this situation to have a friend or someone who can just look out for them in a gentle way, not I'm watching your every move, but a gentle way, so that they can see. Because very often, if you're going into one of these phases, you don't actually notice at the time, because you're very much in yourself. So a friend who has an idea about what's happening can just help you and just sort of sit with you and say, look, I think maybe, something is happening. Maybe you need to go back to the doctor, or maybe you need to take more of this medication or that, because very often the psychiatrists give us things to help if we need. Like if we need, we may get a sleeping tablet for a few nights to help us get back onto the kind of straight and narrow. And I also offer a 55-minute call. That's an orientation call, and it's for someone who's been recently diagnosed, because there is an awful lot of emotions that come up with this diagnosis. For a start, being told that you will probably have to take medication for the rest of your life is traumatic for people. So that's where I aim to kind of help. I also help people if they think they may have bipolar, to the way to go and see their GP, so that they will get a referral to a psychiatrist, and so they won't get into this loop of going back for antidepressants and then cycling again, getting back for antidepressants, and then never really getting the help they need, so that they can live a more stable life. I do a 4-month course, which is Transformational Coaching. And I offer unlimited direct email support, a year tracker for the mood, sleep, events and gratitude, personalized roadmap, which gives you your triggers. And we also look at personalized routine blueprints, so that we can create a routine for you, so that you can just have that. And when things get tough, you can make sure that you're sticking to that, which will go a long way to helping you keep more or less stable. It's impossible to take out everything, but what you can do is you can make it so much easier for that person with these tools. So we look about your identity, because very often people identify with the bipolar diagnosis. And it's important to realize, as I said before, that you are separate. You have compassion for yourself. So many people don't have compassion for themselves because they don't like how they are, whatever. It's very important to be able to accept that and just be gentle with yourself. And again, with the routines, gratitude, and reduction and in anxiety and stress, we do tapping, we do breath work to help people just release that anxiety and change the way they're acting towards stress. And second month, it's basically releasing and rebalancing, reconnecting, learning how to manage all those emotions, and also starting to build your support network, because your support network is vital. And then we work on the roadmap as to where you've been, so that you can learn from the challenges you've been, and you can actually project out to other things and realize that maybe when something's coming up that's stressful, you might need more self-care. You might need again to go back to your psychiatrist. You might need to do something with the medications, or you might just need to take some time out. And then month 4 is living from your heart. Bruce Lee, I think it was, who said, don't think, feel. So it's moving forward with balance, joy, and again, gratitude. Gratitude is hugely important, because even when you're depressed, you can feel gratitude. You can be grateful for the fact that you've got a bed that you want to lie in all the time.
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you, Catherine. That's great. I'm a little bit aware of time.
Yes.
Is that the end of the presentation?
That is the end, yes.
I thought it was, yes, because there's a couple of questions that came up from the presentation that you've had there. So if you want to stop sharing, and we can come back on screen. But you said you were 12.
Yes.
Which is amazing. So what is the average age that someone might be diagnosed?
It's actually late teens.
Okay, it's early then, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just having some difficulty with actually unshowing my screen.
Yeah, there should be a green box somewhere that says stop sharing. It could be red, actually. Let me just see.
Stop sharing. There we are.
There you go.
That's
the one.
Back.
We're back. Do it from there. So late teens is quite early. So we're going to have a lot of young people that are going to be struggling, not knowing what the issue is, what the problem is, and things like this. Because I've learned so much through that. And I'm actually thinking of a lot of people. When you said 1 in 50, I'm thinking, well, I know one, because we've had Scott Ransom on a couple of years ago, and this year I think as well, who is very open, works in recruitment, and talks about bipolar. But I thought, well, maybe I don't know anyone else. But through that discussion, I'm thinking, I think I know quite a few people that this relates to. Now, I'm sure there's extremities of it, as there is with anything, isn't there? And the second thing that popped up was the fact that you said you were working with a psychologist. So would you recommend that rather than a psychiatrist? Because this is a diagnosed condition.
The psychiatrist will actually give you medication, but they don't do the talking therapies or that kind of help that you need on a daily basis. I mean, I would definitely recommend a psychologist. The thing is, they are difficult to come by within the NHS. I mean, I was lucky because I got the help I needed at the time I needed. So normally you'd only get a course of, say, 10 sessions.
Okay. But at least that is a starting point. And hopefully at that point, you'll know whether you are opening up to it and whether it is actually helping you by the 10th session, maybe not the first 5, but by the 10th session, if you stick with it. And then potentially, I take it you can then work on it yourself with a psychologist.
You can. I mean, that was what we decided to do with my psychologist. We sort of worked on lots of things together, and then I took what was best out of all those tools, because I was trying everything, because I really just wanted to I was just interested in the way things worked and how it worked and how the human works with emotions and energy and all of this kind of thing. So for me, it was kind of a treasure trove, really, working with the psychologist, who was very open and who didn't just have one. She wasn't a one-trick pony, because some of them are a bit, we'll just do talking therapies. And I've never found personally that the talking therapies helped, because it was like, I know this, but it doesn't help me, get rid of this emotion.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And the 12 seconds as well, never heard that before. So any emotion then, if you can just stop and let it flow over, whatever it is,
because it wants to come out. We're built for things to come through us, not for things to stop and kind of be stuck.
Yes, and obviously that was your experience with all those things. When you were going through that, I was like, oh my goodness, the next thing and the next thing, and no wonder you holding it all in. It's going to come out in that sense. Just interesting to see Blake's comment in there saying he met someone in Greece, so this is quite recently, could see her having these highs and lows, and actually asked her whether she was bipolar. So that in itself is really brave. Turns out she was. Had a great conversation. I'm just thinking, what would be the issues if she wasn't? Because that is really hard, isn't it? What would you suggest if you think you know someone that, having seen all of this, like myself, how would you approach that conversation?
I would just say, that I've recently attended a talk or something, and I understood this, and I didn't like to pry or anything, but I had noticed whatever, and just in a gentle way that you're not judging or anything. You're just saying, this sounds like something that could apply to you, in that kind of way. And anyone who has this would be they would be grateful, because you've said it in a non-judgmental way, kindly, and you're interested. So
again, being able to actually, like you say, offload, don't keep it in, being able to have that conversation again, releases it again, doesn't it? So it makes a big difference. Wonderful. Well, that's our 45 minutes. It went so quickly, but thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. This gets downloaded into the course in the gym, Meet the Expert. This is number 23. We do them every month, so it'll be 2 years next month, won't it?
Wow.
If you haven't seen the others, click on the green button at the bottom of Crowdcast here. Go and join us in the gym. We do 6 courses for free, of which this is one. So lots of resources for you, over 200 sessions. There'll be stuff in there that will be helpful for you in your career. So feel free to come and join us. We're a lovely community. We like to help. Knowledge shared is our key element here. Make sure that everyone gets what they need to be able to be their best selves. Wonderful. Have a fantastic weekend, Catherine. Thank you so much again for sharing. And we'll see you all again next month on Meet the Expert. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.